Pull up that stool, won't you? Closer to the fire, that's it. The wind's coming straight off the North Sea tonight, raw and bitter as January iron. You'll have felt it on the walk here, I expect. The sort of cold that finds the gaps in your coat and makes your bones ache. Here, let me pour you something. This ale's from the cellar, been settling since autumn, and it'll put the warmth back in you. You've come a fair way tonight. I can always tell. There's a particular look people get when they've been walking country roads after dark. That slight tension in the shoulders, the way the eyes adjust to the firelight. The Suffolk lanes aren't like city streets, are they? No street lamps every 20 yards, just hedgerows and field gates, and the sort of darkness that makes you remember why our ancestors were afraid of the night. Speaking of which, you'll have passed through Polstead on your way here. Pretty village, Polstead. Church with a Norman tower, ancient pollarded oaks, the river box running through. Constable painted these parts, you know. All that gentle Suffolk beauty, the hay wains and mill ponds. But Constable had the good sense to paint in daylight. He knew better than to capture what the darkness held. I mention Polstead because there's a story attached to that village. A story that made it famous for all the wrong reasons. Still does, truth be told. Ask anyone in these parts about the Red Barn, and they'll know exactly what you mean. Not because of the barn itself, that burned down near 2 centuries ago, but because of what happened there, what was buried there, and more to the point, how it was found. This happened in 1827, when George IV was on the throne and Suffolk was still a world unto itself. Polstead wasn't some isolated hamlet, mind you. It sat right on the coaching routes between London and the eastern ports. Merchants passed through regularly, drovers, wool traders, all the commerce of the age. But it was still a place where everyone knew everyone, where your business was the village's business, and where secrets had a way of festering. The story centres on 2 people, Maria Marten and William Corder. She was a mole catcher's daughter, 25 years old, living in a tied cottage with her family. He was a farmer's son, master of Street Farm after his father and brothers died within 18 months of each other. Bit of fortune, that. Or perhaps misfortune, depending on how you look at it. Maria and William had what you might call an understanding, except it wasn't understood by anyone official. She'd borne him a child, died in infancy, tragically. Before that, she'd had children by other men, including William's own brother. This wasn't uncommon in rural England, but it made her vulnerable. The parish authorities were threatening prosecution for bastardy, which could mean the workhouse or worse. William promised her marriage, told her they'd elope, go to London, make it legal and respectable. He just needed to arrange things quietly first, he said. No fuss, no scandal. On the 18th of May, 1827, Maria left her father's cottage dressed in men's clothing, coat, breeches, hat pulled low. The plan, William told her, was to avoid notice. They'd meet at the Red Barn, where she'd change into her own clothes, and then they'd catch the coach to Ipswich. Her young brother George watched them walk across the fields toward the barn, watched William carrying a pickaxe over his shoulder. The boy asked why. Planting trees, William said, for the farm. Maria was never seen alive again. The fire's burning down. Let me add another log before I go on. There. Listen to it crack and settle. That sound, wood breaking under pressure. You'll want to remember that sound. Now, here's where you need to understand what Polstead was in those days. Not the village itself, the landscape around it, the fields and coverts, the network of paths and farm tracks. This was the height of what they called the Poaching Wars. The game laws were brutal, protecting the pheasants and the hares for the gentry while the labourers went hungry. But the night belonged to the poachers. You'd hear them if you were out after dark. Whistles that sounded like birds. The squeak of a hare, except it wasn't. Signals passing between men who moved through the darkness like ghosts, avoiding the gamekeepers, the man-trap, the spring guns. A sharp sound in the distance. Could be a shot. Could be a branch cracking. You learn not to ask. That's important, because on the night of May 18th, someone claimed they heard a shot coming from the direction of the Red Barn, but nobody thought much of it. Just poachers on the land again. Just the usual business of a Suffolk night. William Corder returned to the village alone, told Maria's father, Thomas, that she'd gone ahead to Ipswich and was staying with friends. He'd join her in a few days, he said, once he'd settled his affairs. Thomas accepted this. What choice did he have? His daughter had made her decision. Young people did these things. Days became weeks. Corder stayed in Polstead, working his farm, drinking in the Cock Inn with the other men. Always had an explanation when Thomas asked after Maria. She was waiting in Ipswich. No, actually, they'd married already. Private ceremony, very quiet. She'd write soon. Her hand was lame, though. Couldn't hold a pen properly. But she was well, very happy. Then Corder left for London. Said he was joining Maria there, that they'd settled in rooms near the river, and the letters started arriving. Thomas Marten couldn't read, but the vicar could. The letters were full of ordinary details. The weather in London, the price of provisions, how well Maria was settling in, how they might take a house on the Isle of Wight. Always an excuse for why Maria herself hadn't written. Always that lame hand. Always tomorrow, next week, soon. Meanwhile, in London, William Corder was building a different life entirely. He placed an advertisement in the Sunday Times. Private gentleman, 24 years of age, entirely independent, seeks a lady of similar standing for matrimony. He received over 100 replies. Selected Mary Moore, a respectable schoolmistress, married her. Opened a boarding school for young ladies in Brentford. A good life, a proper life. The kind of farmer's son with ambitions deserved. And back in Suffolk, in a barn on Barnfield Hill, Maria Marten lay 18 inches beneath the earth floor, wrapped in a sack, still wearing the green silk handkerchief William had tied around her throat. The barn was still in use, filled with wheat and fodder. Farm workers came and went daily. Nobody noticed the patch of disturbed earth near the right-hand bay. Why would they? Barns are working buildings. The ground gets scuffed and trampled. Sacks get moved. Chaff settles over everything. But Maria's stepmother, Anne Marten, only a year older than Maria herself, noticed something else, or claimed to. It started in April of 1828. Anne woke in the night, shaking. Told Thomas she dreamed of Maria. Murdered, she said. Buried in the Red Barn. Same dream, 3 nights running. Exact same place in the barn each time. The right-hand side, near the grain storage. Now, here's where the story gets complicated. Was it truly a dream? Anne was sharp-eyed and observant. Had she noticed William's behaviour? The way he'd avoided that barn afterwards? The news of his London marriage to someone else had just reached Polstead. Was the dream a convenient way for a woman to speak a truth she couldn't otherwise voice? A way to point without accusing, to know without admitting she knew? We'll never have that answer. But Thomas Marten believed her, and on the morning of April 19th, he took his Mole-Spud, that narrow spade he used for his trade, and walked to the Red Barn. The barn was dim, full of shadow and stored harvest. Thomas probed the floor where Anne had described. The spud met loose earth. He dug down, perhaps 18 inches. His tool struck something that wasn't soil. A sack. Inside what remained of his daughter. The flesh largely gone after 11 months, but enough left to identify. The green handkerchief still tight around the neck bones. The clothing, those men's clothes she'd worn to avoid notice, and other things the surgeon would later catalogue at the inquest. Things that told a story of violence. The barn hadn't kept it secret after all. The earth had held it, but the earth had also given it up. And now Thomas Marten stood in that dim space looking down at what his spade had found. And the silence of nearly a year shattered like glass. They brought Maria's body to the Cock Inn. That's how it was done in those days. The public house served as courthouse, meeting hall, and morgue when the need arose. The tap room where men had drunk with William Corder, where he'd laughed and settled his accounts and played the prosperous farmer, became the site of the coroner's inquest. The surgeon, John Lawton, examined what the Red Barn had preserved. His testimony was methodical, clinical. A pistol ball lodged in the neck, a sharp instrument, sword or dagger, driven through the eye socket into the brain, the handkerchief drawn so tight it had left its mark on bone, a wound to the cheek. Each injury alone might have been fatal. Together, they spoke of something beyond accident or impulse. The jury viewed the remains as the law required. 12 men from the village looking at what their neighbour had become. They returned a verdict within the hour. Willful murder against William Corder. James Lee of the Metropolitan Police found him in Brentford, teaching young ladies their letters. Arrested him in his own schoolroom, with his new wife watching. Corder maintained his composure at first, claimed Maria had shot herself, that he'd panicked and buried her, that the other injuries, well, those must have happened after. Decomposition, animal interference, but he couldn't explain the 11 months of letters. The marriage advertisement placed while Thomas Marten still believed his daughter lived. The careful construction of a phantom life, while the real Maria lay wrapped in sacking beneath trampled earth. The trial at Bury St. Edmund lasted 2 days. The prosecution prepared 9 separate indictments. Murder by shooting, by stabbing, by strangulation, by suffocation. Covering every method the surgeon had found. They weren't taking chances. The dream was entered into evidence, and while the judge couldn't accept it as proof, it stood as explanation for the discovery. Divine intervention, some called it. The dead reaching through sleep to accuse their killer. The jury took 35 minutes to convict. They hanged William Corder on the 11th of August, 1828. Somewhere between 7,000 and 20,000 people came to watch. He confessed on the scaffold, though the details died with him. His body was taken to the Shire Hall for dissection. Punishment under the Murder Act, denial of Christian burial. They performed galvanic experiments, running electrical current through the corpse to make the muscles twitch. 5,000 people filed past to view the result. A surgeon named George Creed took a section of Corder's skin, tanned it like leather, and used it to bind an account of the trial. That book still exists, kept at Moyses Hall Museum in Bury St Edmunds. You can see it if you've the stomach for it. The leather's coarse, retaining the texture of what it was. Corder's skull was kept too, measured by phrenologists who claimed his head showed bumps for secretiveness and destructiveness, as if evil could be charted in bone. The Red Barn burned in 1842. Some say arson, some say accident. Either way, the site was too notorious to let stand. But the story didn't burn with it. Ballads spread the tale across the country. Broadsheets sold by the thousand. Melodramas played it in fairground booths for decades. Maria Marten, or the murder in the Red Barn, became shorthand for betrayal, for the dangers young women faced from men who promised marriage. The fire's almost out now, just embers glowing in the ash, like eyes in the dark. Your glass is empty and the wind's dropped outside. You'll have a clear walk home. But before you go, let me leave you with this. Anne Marten's dream, whether true vision or careful accusation, it did what the law couldn't do alone. It broke the silence, gave Thomas Marten permission to dig where he might not have dared otherwise. The dead cannot speak, but perhaps the living can speak for them in whatever voice they must. Here's to the secrets the earth keeps, and to the ones it refuses to hold, to the dreams that accuse and the spades that prove them true, and to staying wary of promises made in darkness, in barns where nobody else can hear. Now off with you. Mind the lanes on your way back. And if you ever find yourself in Polstead of an evening, walking past where that barn once stood, don't linger. Some ground remembers what it held. Some silences still have weight. The dead are buried, but they're not always quiet. You've been listening to British Pub Law. Mind how you go.